This week I discovered that if you're going to interview a journalist, you're going to have some trouble because they can't help themselves and they start interviewing you instead of you interviewing them. And that's exactly what happened with this week's guest. I had a whole list of questions for her, but they all went out the window and she started asking me questions. But we actually had a blast and we were really off the cuff and we got into some good topics and some embarrassing stories that you're not going to want to miss. But let me tell you who this guest is. The guest is Natalie Tysdal, and she has over 27 years of TV broadcasting experience and a collection of prestigious awards, including an Emmy. And she was on a well-known morning show, and she took all her skills as a journalist, a writer, and a media specialist and started her own podcast to help others learn more about their health and to interview guests who can educate and inspire. I was on her podcast a year ago, and it was so great that I asked her to be on my podcast. So let me stop this intro, and let's get into it, where you're going to hear about medical gaslighting and burnout and embarrassing stories and so much more. Let's go. Let's have fun. Welcome to the Medical Disruptor Podcast. I am so excited that you're here. Thank you for being here.
Well, it's good to see you again. I think it's been about a year since you were on my podcast.
Yes, it's been about a year. It took me that long to finally realize that my listeners would really benefit from having guests like you on and not just listen to me talk all the time, you know?
I do the same thing. I rotate. I love having guests on because I feel like it's a conversation versus being just talking at people.
You're talking all the time, yeah. So your story is interesting, right? We have a lot of health gurus on, and we have a lot of doctors or nurse practitioners that come from different spaces. But your story is rather interesting. So walk us through how you got into the health space.
Well, so I like to say that I'm a connoisseur of information at all times. And I became a journalist out of college and spent 28 years as a journalist, a TV news reporter, anchor. My first job was actually as a videographer, and I love telling stories. Little did I know when I became a journalist that my specialty would be in health. And I think the way I got there was probably like a lot of us get to what we are passionate about, and that is the feedback that I got. We could talk all day in the news business about the toxic stuff, right? Politics, fires, murders, just toxic news. And I call it that because I believe that when we feed our brain with that, that's how we feel. When I did news stories that were health related, it made people better. It helped them. And I would get that feedback from my viewers, and they would email me and call me, whatever it was. And they would say, thank you so much. I got this information for my mom or my sister, and I found out about this new procedure. I learned about this new treatment, and it changed my life. And I soon learned that that's the kind of journalism that I wanted to do. I wanted to be the person that helped others and told good stories. And sometimes I did a lot of stories through the years at like St. Jude's Hospital, or I would follow someone through their health journey. I would talk to just thousands of doctors over the years or health professionals in lots of different places. That's how I ended up a health journalist. I was an anchor of a morning show, so I did a 4-hour morning show with all the other stuff, but the highlight of my program was always, how am I helping people, and what is the health story or the story that's helping them in some way.
Oh, I love that. It's so interesting that you said that because this past 6 months I've been doing a lot of TV. And every month there's a different month, right? It's Alzheimer's awareness, mental health awareness, which is really amazing. But this past month, we've been doing a topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is medical gaslighting. And what's very interesting about it is that we'll finish the recording, and every single time at the end, the producers will the recording's over, and they're like, wow, we wish we had someone like you in our life, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's so crazy. So I feel like this impactful moment with actual staff on the TV. Actually, one of them became my patient.
Absolutely. I mean, many of the doctors that I see and the professionals that I see, I had on the show, and I'll call them, and I'm friends with them, and I have them on my show now. Tell me, can I ask you a question?
Yeah,
but I do. I'm going to turn it right back around on you, Doctor.
What is medical gaslighting? You cannot stop it.
Medical gaslighting? I just wrote that down. I'm like, this is a great topic for my show too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll come on your show. I'm actually writing my second book on it right now. So medical gaslighting is basically anything other than your medical provider saying, I believe you, let's explore this. Anything other than that is medical gaslighting. So if they're saying, if you say, I have all this fatigue, this aches and pains, and they run all the tests, and they say, well, everything's fine. Maybe it's your stress. Maybe it's your hormones. Maybe it's your weight, or maybe it's in your head. So it's a dismissal a downplaying of your symptoms that makes you feel at the end like you start questioning yourself. Well, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm really anxious. Maybe, I mean, I've had clients come to me, but like at this point, they've been offering anxiety medication so many times that I think maybe I do have anxiety. So that's what medical gaslighting is. And my contention, though, in everything that I say is that there is no malice in it. It's not that the doctors are waking up in the morning and saying, I want to gaslight patients. I think there is an indoctrination in what we learn in medical school. I consider myself a reformed gaslighter. I think that you learn and you are indoctrinated to think that the tools in conventional medicine are the only tools. And if I can't find something wrong with you with those tools, it must be you. You must be the problem. I think it's a natural conclusion based on the way people are taught. So there's less malice and more hubris and arrogance.
Yeah.
And I spend some time, I do lectures with providers, try to teach them how to not be a medical gaslighter. So that's medical gaslighting.
I have several thoughts on that as a journalist.
Go.
Well, first of all, when you first came, well, I just have a different perspective, right? We all see things from different places. When you first came on my show, I think the title of what we did was "It's Not in Your Head." I think it was something like that, because I love how you get to the root of what's happening and you listen to people. So as a journalist, one of the things that I would always tell people, and I think we're in a different place today than we were 28 years ago when I started in the business. People have access to information, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Because they have information that is not always good, and they're out there trying to diagnose themselves, right?
Absolutely.
I always tell people, follow people that you trust. So if you're doing your research on whatever your issue is, I heard you talking about Hashimoto's recently. So if you're doing your research on Hashimoto's, who are you going to follow to get that information? What blog is going to have good information?
Yeah. Because
there's so much out there that we could go down so many rabbit holes. So that's what I always tell people. But my thought on the gaslighting is, I don't want to be too controversial, but
do it. It's controversial.
But I think it's important. I think it's really important that we trust our providers. And the typical medical industry is just in such a hurry so often. And I've seen it recently with one of my kids who's had knee pain for years. She's a dancer. And I took her in and a couple of years ago, and the doctor said, yeah, you're a dancer. Your knee's just going to hurt.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Well, 3 years later, she's in college as a musical theater major and dancing every day, dancing her butt off. And I took her into someone else who said, you know what? Your hips have issues.
Oh.
That's why your knee hurts. And I'm like, okay, maybe if we would have looked into that 2 or 3 years.
Imagine looking a little bit above the knee.
Yeah. And even below. They said, and your toes need strength and your ankles need strength. And so she's in physical therapy for her hips, toes, and knee and ankles. Not for her knee. I mean, they're helping the knee, but I use that as just such a broad example of the industry sometimes just being, as you said, I feel like she was gaslighted. It was like, you're a dancer. It's just going to hurt sometimes.
Exactly right. And it was a really good example of what you brought, because I imagine that the person who discovered the hip issue was what, a physical therapist?
It was a physical therapist. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this is such a great scenario. I'm so happy you brought this in, because when she went to the orthopedist, I imagine, maybe the pediatrician, the orthopedist, there is an algorithm and follow, right? I'm sure this person is a very lovely person. He or she went to school for a long time and they really want to help. And so they came in and they did the algorithm, and based on the algorithm, there's nothing further that can be done. And so in their mind, they really feel that they've done the best. Yeah. And this is an important piece because it removes the anger, right? So in their mind, they really think they did the best. And so if someone did their best, they did their best. And they did. They used the algorithm. And you had to go to someone who has a different algorithm.
Yes, absolutely.
A therapist who now says, listen, I'm not going to look here. I'm going to look here. I'm going to look here. I'm going to look at the whole body as a whole. That this is a different lens than the orthopedist. The orthopedist does not necessarily do that.
Yeah.
And so the medical gaslighting happens because at no point does the orthopedist will say, listen, I don't have the answer. But instead of saying, it's you,
yes,
maybe let's explore a different algorithm. That's the piece that's missing. Like, what would it look like if someone with Hashimoto's said, they went to their PCP and their PCP said, listen, I'm going to put you on meds, you need to be on meds. But, I heard of this other functional medicine doctor down the street. I don't really understand it, but go explore that. And if we need to collaborate, we'll collaborate. Right? So that is what I'm looking for. I'm not asking providers and PCPs and people in conventional medicine. And I practice conventional medicine I still do it every Monday in my practice. I'm not asking for people who spent all these years learning conventional medicine to unlearn or to relearn or to go back to school. I did that. It takes a lot of time. I'm asking them to be open to the possibility that if they don't have the answer, it doesn't mean it's the patient's problem now. You're just a dancer. You're just overweight. You're just 65. You're just busy.
Yeah, right.
Like, you're putting it back on the patient. Just say, okay, I don't have it. Let's explore something else.
I couldn't agree more. But part of that, I think, is a little bit of a hierarchy of, and maybe that's the wrong word, but a little bit of like, well, I'm the top doctor, so if I don't have the answer, and we think as consumers, I'm going to the expert. I'm going to the specialist in, you know?
Yeah. Yes.
And so we have to reframe that and say they might be a specialist in that, but and this is probably the biggest lesson as a journalist that I learned, that I like to tell people in my podcast and everything I do, you have to take control of your health. You might not be the specialist. You might not have all of the answers. You have to learn to ask good questions. And part of that is what if you can't find an answer, what I'm hearing you say, if you can't find an answer, where will you lead me? Or do you practice conventional and non-conventional? Do you believe in you know? And so asking those questions.
And then also using, I have more questions for you, but we're here now. Using every provider for what they can do. So the other thing, like I write, is that you can't go to a plumber and ask for electric.
That's right.
Right? So you can't go to your PCP and say, well, why aren't you doing functional medicine tests? I heard about this microbiome thing. They don't have that tool set. So you go to them for the usual, you will go to them to rule out disease, make sure my thyroid's okay, make sure I don't have anemia, make sure I don't have cancer, right? Make sure all these things are happening. And then when I say there's nothing wrong with you, you say, thank you so much. Thank you for using all of your tools. I'm not going to ask you to do something else. I'm not going to get frustrated with you. Now you go to your point, take control of your health, and you go somewhere else that said, okay, now let's explore your tools. And let's explore your tools, and let's explore your tools. It makes you less frustrated. It is a job. You do have to take accountability for it. But the idea that one person is going to have all your answers it's just not possible.
Yeah. And it's a different day. 25 years ago, maybe we would have done a little bit of this, but we have these things accessible to us. It is a job. And that's probably the hard part, is we want it to be easy, just like everything else in life. The good thing is it's easier today to find these people than it may have been. We can find good reviews. We can Google and ask people.
Facebook groups and
absolutely. Oh, good point. Yeah, we have the tools to find them, so it's just doing it.
Yeah, I'm one of the few in my sphere that I like when my patients Google. Right? I don't want it for you if it makes you anxious and Google your symptoms and makes you anxious and now you think you're dying. I don't want that for you as a patient. Mm-hmm. But if you want to be an informed patient, and now you're coming in with questions and also possibilities. What if there is a diagnosis that I would not have considered? Even if we spend the time ruling it out that it isn't that, and that has calmed you, then that's great, right? That was also therapeutic. If you really are convinced that you have X, and you and I could walk through that process together, and I could show you that you don't have X, well, that was therapeutic also, as opposed to saying, don't Google your symptoms.
Can I give you a almost embarrassing story that I have to tell because you're going to laugh, but it's also an example of getting to the right person? Okay. I can't believe I'm telling this story because I love the story. I'm already loving it. I don't know. People are going to laugh. But back in January, so 7 months ago, I slipped on the ice in Colorado, some black ice, and I broke my shoulder. And it was terrible. I mean, I knew immediately that it was a bad deal. And I went right down. I broke the greater tuberosity, the big ball in the shoulder, shattered it. And went to the ER. Long story short, ended up in a sling. Didn't need surgery, but it healed well. But about 6 weeks after the break, I was having so much pain. I mean, like pain I've never had. I thought it was like nerve pain because it wasn't in my shoulder, it was in my bicep. So my bicep was just pinging, like ping, ping. And it was like kept me up at night. So here's where it gets bad. So I was icing it because I knew icing it would help the inflammation, right? So I'm sitting at my desk one day. I got out the ice and it wasn't cold enough. So I got out a pack that was one of the gel packs and I put it right on there. And I'm just working away and it felt a little bit better. So a couple days later, I'm like, I think it's a little bit better. And it swells up like crazy and heated, swollen. And it was hot. And I thought, and I go online and I'm Googling everything. I call my general care doctor. I go in. She looks at it. She calls all the other doctors in. They're all looking at it and they're like, we think it's a blood clot. And so, trauma in my shoulder. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a blood clot. They send me straight over to get an ultrasound. So the ultrasound, and she's like, yep, oh wow, this could be dangerous. So she's looking at it, no blood clot. I'm like, I think I have like a flesh-eating bacteria. I'm like, it was like,
I'm obviously dying.
It was terrible. Yeah. So a couple weeks later, it turns dark and almost a scab. I go to my dermatologist. I'm like, I have a flesh-eating bacteria. Like, she's like, did you ice it? I'm like, yeah, I iced it. She said, you know where I'm going. She said, this is frostbite. It's an ice burn. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me.
That is good.
Did you ice it? I'm like, I don't know. I was working. I couldn't feel the ice. Like, it hurt so bad. I couldn't feel the ice.
And it hurt so bad that you didn't feel the pain of the frostbite.
No.
Oh,
she said, I see this with ice and with heating pads. And pain is so great that you don't feel the treatment. And so you just keep it on there. So embarrassing, especially I'm not a health expert, but I'm a health journalist. I say that because I had to go to several people to get an answer. I went to my doctor. I went to the ultrasound person.
And then now I have to tell you an embarrassing story too, just so we can create a safe space for you.
I hope I'm helping someone who never iced for more than, 15, 20 minutes? Just don't.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Okay. Since we're not even like on any topics at this point, we're just having fun, and we'll tell you.
People are learning from us, right?
People are learning. And also, this is actually really good. Like, you're a health journalist. I'm a medical professional. We should be on point. So if anyone out there has an embarrassing story, we're all in the same boat. It doesn't matter. It turns out that when it's about you or about your son, which is I'm about to tell you, all logic goes out the window. So it was the beginning of my practice. Didn't have a lot of patients back then. So my son used to come straight from school, and he would sit and do homework. And he grew up in my clinic. Anyway, he walks in one day, just like holding on to his stomach, like just level 10, And I'm like, well, what's going on, buddy? And he can't. I'm doing all the testing. I'm thinking this kid has appendicitis. There's no question. I scoop him up. I put him in the car. And like every bump is hurting him, which is classic, like for appendicitis, because like there's, the inflammation is going everywhere. So I bring him into the ER. Now they see me in the ER. Everyone in the hospital knows me. So if E is bringing her son into the ER, he's obviously dying. There's no question. So like the seas are parting. I just go right into the room. I don't have to stop and triage. I don't have to, because obviously,
yes,
Dr. E is bringing his son and he's obviously dying. So I put him there, and a lot of people rush in, and I go now to register him because, obviously they're going to save this child's life. I come back in for registration. This is lying down like this, watching TV. I'm like, what is going on here? Diagnosis, constipation. I wanted to die. Like the amount of like people in the room for this diagnosis. And he wore the damn bracelet. He wouldn't take the hospital bracelet off. He wore it to school. I was like, take the bracelet off. It was so embarrassing.
So lesson learned, kids can be kind of dramatic.
And like, do I not know that? Of course I know that. I put all logic out the window for my son.
Yourself or that's a great story.
When it's yourself or your family.
Yeah.
So you can't. You're not supposed to treat your own family. This is exactly why.
Oh, that's a great story.
Yeah. Okay. So hopefully you feel better about your ice story now.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and it's all healed. I thought I was gonna have a scar because it was white where it burned. I mean, it was a ice burn. So I had this like
That is
butterfly-looking white spot on my arm. It did kind of go away, but yeah.
that is crazy. Okay, so I'm going to bring this back on track now because I think we have some good topics here. So what I'm going to ask you, a little lead in, like one of the with medical gaslighting, the groups that are most affected by, everyone's affected, but mostly women and minorities are affected by it. So in your world, like as a health reporter, what have you kind of seen in the health industry around women? What advice do you have for women around this specifically? Or
Around gaslighting in particular?
no, what your world of like health, medical gaslighting, I know was kind of new for you. We just learned this topic here, but
Just labeling it is so good. Like it really goes back to what I advise people all the time. You have to be your best advocate. You just do. You can't go to one doctor and say, "What should I do?" and then go home and say, "Well, that's what they said." It doesn't work. Like you have to advocate for yourself. You have to ask the question. So that's the greatest piece of advice I think I can give people. And I think it's okay, as you said, to tell a doctor like, or ask them, who might you recommend that I see outside of your expertise? And if they say, I'm kind of giving you the answer, then maybe that's the wrong doctor for you. They should be willing to, as you mentioned, they should be willing to say, well, why don't you try this?
yeah,
And be open to that.
right. Because the other thing is, I don't know if you experience this, but like you'll go, let's just say you'll find a holistic provider. A lot of holistic providers can't order labs, or they can because it's different licensing. Like I can order labs in New York and New Jersey because I have a medical license here as well, NP license here. But if I have a client that I'm coaching in California, I can only give some advice, but I can't really order anything. So a lot of what people will face is they'll go to the PCP and say, listen, I'm working with this holistic provider and we need some testing done. And they'll say no. They'll just say no. I don't know if you've experienced this. They're like, no, I'm not running these labs. And so then clients are like stuck because they're like, well, I'm trying to help myself, but there's certain, limitations. So when people ask me, what do I look for in a medical provider? I would say, look for someone who's willing to collaborate.
Yeah.
And that's the question, right? Like you may not know what they know or don't know, but if I have a team of integrative team or other specialists, will you collaborate? And if they're like, no, listen, I don't have time for that. It's good enough.
Probably my greatest concern is doctors, any healthcare provider that doesn't have time. And I know it's a time game, especially in a lot of doctors' offices. It's 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes, or, in and out of rooms. But that to me is a whole separate issue. And so I think, I don't know where I'm going with that other than to say that I'm frustrated by it.
So let's talk about the time thing because, right, I have two worlds. I have my medical practice, which really moves fast, and I'll explain like the why. And then I have, coaching, which moves slow, like it's an hour consultation.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to take medical providers off the hook on this one because it's not a choice. It's not your doctor's choice to move this fast. It's not your NP's choice to move fast. It's not the PA's choice to move fast. It's the way the system is set up.
Yeah, it is. And that's why I'm frustrated by it. Mm-hmm.
No medical provider likes it. We hate the speed. So when you're, as patients listening, don't get mad at the doctor. Nobody wants to see a patient in 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Nobody wants this. If you have a business, I'm sorry that I'm the one talking on this podcast, and you're my guest.
I'm telling you, what? It's just a thing. I'm a journalist, and I can't help it. I always turn around on people.
Okay, as long as you're comfortable with it, because I want to give you the space and I'm talking. But I was trying to explain it to someone, like imagine you have a store, and whatever, you're selling shoes, you're selling widgets. And, the price of making the shoe goes up. The price of making the shoe is more expensive. The leather is more expensive. The labor is more expensive. They're more expensive. So then, of course, you're going to raise the price of the shoe to help you offset. So you still make your $10. You're making $10 a shoe. You need to still make your $10.
In the end, it's a business.
In the end, it's a business, right? In a medical practice, the cost of the shoe keeps going up, right? Labor goes up. Electric goes up. The mortgage goes up. Everything goes up. But you have no control over the price. In fact, instead of saying, okay, well, I will raise my price, the only person paying you is the insurance company, and the insurance company keeps bringing it down every year.
Yeah.
So the cost of a shoe goes up. You have no control over pricing. Your reimbursement continues to go down. And so you have no choice but to move faster just to break even, not from greed, just to maintain the same level and be able to pay the same salaries that you did last year and the year before, you have to move faster. And so it's this insurance game. It's the bloated insurance companies where their admin and their appeals process and their executives that is completely diverting all resources away from patients into bureaucracy and a C-suite. Like, the top executives.
I do.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I don't know what the answer is. Like, I hear you saying that, and I run a business. I get it.
Yeah.
But it's still not good for the consumer, right? So and maybe it is for you as the healthcare provider to say, I'm going to be sure my patients don't feel that, because, when I'm in an office and you feel like they're in a hurry and they're not listening to me, like, okay, all right, okay, guess I'm done. That feeling, you know what I'm talking about, maybe,
Exactly what we're talking about. So you are correct about that. So if you look at our reviews in the practice, right, different than the other companies, you don't see anything about being rushed. In fact, thank goodness my providers are really wonderful. So there is an art form to it. There is an art form to be able to move fast without having the patient feel rushed. And you're right. And there's a few small things that you can do. And now I'm giving advice to providers who are listening. First of all, work at the top of your license. Let other people do the vital signs and ask the questions that you shouldn't, like, you want to come in and really address this. And I don't want to sit there going, well, you have a penicillin allergy, because now I'm taking your time away from. So let someone else do that. Then I come in. The other thing I do, I made a decision to spend money on like medical scribes so that I'm not typing.
Yeah. Saving more time. Yeah.
With you. It's not just saving time, but when I'm with you, I'm not looking at the screen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing, providers, for goodness sake, sit down. Sit down when your patients are talking to you.
Yeah.
When you're standing and hovering and like almost out the door, a lot of it is just plain social cues. Sit down. I listen to the story. I almost always sit in the exam room unless I just had a day when I just was sitting too much. But there's something about sitting down that lets the other person say, I'm here for it, I'm listening. So small, it doesn't take more time.
Yeah.
And then you don't say, do you have any more questions? You say, what questions do you have? So it doesn't take, but what questions do you have? I've already created a space. Not like, do you have any more questions? Like, I guess not. So, like, if ready, what questions do you have already makes you feel like you're in a safe space. So these small little things, really, to your point, you can move fast because the industry is forcing you to, in a sense. But you could really also address the things and then collaborate and say, I don't have the answer, but let's find out. Let's explore this together.
Yeah. And go to the next step instead of dismissing them or gaslighting them. So exactly. All good stuff. Really good.
What other questions do you have for me?
I can come up with a million.
Okay, hold on. So I'm going back to you now, Miss Gentleman, because I know that as a busy professional and a journalist and all that you do, there's this issue of like burnout, right? There's this issue of burnout.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Did you experience that, or is that something you've seen?
Oh yeah. I most certainly did. And do you see, here I go again. Do you see many people who experience this and have identified it?
No, they don't know to identify it.
They don't identify it. I don't think I identified it until well after I experienced it. So first of all, let me paint the picture. I did a morning show, and my alarm went off at 2:30 in the morning. I went into work at 3:30 in the morning. I had a 3:45 meeting. The show started at 4:30, and then I was on live until 9:30. And then I would do the follow-up work after and preparing for the next day. And then I would come home and be a mom full time. So I thought I had the perfect life. I'm I'm getting to great. But I did. I was like, I'm giving up a sleep. Well, I get to have a real profession, and I get to be a full-time mom. This is great.
Wow.
I get to go to their plays. I get to go volunteer in school. I was the president of the PTO. Like, I get to do all of this. Yeah, until I turned into a zombie around 4:00 in the afternoon. And you know that feeling after, I always tell my kids when they stay up late or they like have a sleepover or something crazy, and then it's not the next day they feel like crap. It's the day after.
Yeah.
Where the next day they're like, I feel great. That didn't affect me at all. And then the day after you have that like drag.
Crash. Yeah.
Yeah, that drag all day. Like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I lived my life like that. And I thought it was okay. So then I did this for 17 years.
Oh my God.
And I loved my job. I loved what I did. And so, I realized it was burnout when I no longer enjoyed what I used to love. When doing the morning show that was so dear to me became such a chore. Wow. Because being a mom was not, well, sometimes that's a chore, but being a mom, I loved, but I didn't feel like I was my best self with my kids. And when they wanted me to sit down and play a game before dinner, and I didn't want to do that because I just had that brain drain.
Oh my God. Sometimes playing a game is the hardest thing in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. But I wanted to enjoy that. And it was the last thing I wanted to do. So I'll tell you when it hit me. And if there's anything that came out of COVID that was good, it forced us all to reanalyze our lives. That's because we're sitting at home.
So true.
And I was broadcasting out of my basement because I still had to work. And they brought cameras in, and I did the morning show out of my basement. My co-anchor and I were each in our own place. And I just realized, like, I don't have to keep doing this. Why am I doing this? And I had this, like, light bulb moment of, like, gee, it's what I trained to do. It's what I worked so hard to do. People think it's a great job, but am I really loving it? So that was my get away from it moment. I left. I started the podcast because I realized I don't have to drive downtown to a studio to do good interviews.
Yeah, it creates possibilities that you didn't think.
Yeah, I mean, there's this whole world of YouTube and podcasting, and I can still get stories out there and interview amazing people. I don't need a television station to do that. So that's when I left. And then it was after, when I started feeling good again, that's when I realized, oh, wow, that was burnout. That was real burnout.
So what did feeling good feel like?
I forgot what that felt like.
When you started, I started feeling good. Like, what did that feel? When you were like,
I didn't have that drain every day. Yeah, I didn't have that. I don't know how to describe it except the day after you've done an all-nighter, and the 2 days later, where you just have that brain drain, that but you can't sleep. It's that I'm tired, but I can't sleep.
Yeah,
I'm anxious.
Tired but wired.
Yeah, and I didn't have that. So it was when I realized, I don't have that anymore. I thought that was just life. I thought it was just me getting older. And so it was probably a year or two after when I realized that was real burnout. Wow. And I just shocked. And I think probably a lot of men and women, but particularly I think a lot of women, they put that pressure on themselves, like I did, of I have to do it all.
You have to do it all. You have to do it all. You have to clear and the PTA.
Yeah. Maybe it's where we grew up, of this female empowerment of like, I can do it all. I can have this cool job. Yep, I certainly can. And I can run my household, and I can be a good mom. So why shouldn't I do it all without going, yeah.
It's just some guilt, right? Like,
oh, totally. 100%.
Like if you're taking for yourself to develop yourself, you're a terrible mom if you're not also baking cookies.
Yeah, totally. Oh, there were so many days where it was like, Mom, I need brownies for my class tomorrow. I'm like, okay, I got it. Got it.
Oh, no, I had a rule in my house. No, if you're not telling me a week before, it's not happening. Do not ask. My kids, no, do not ask for oak tag the day before. It's not happening. Don't ask.
I guilted myself into all of that. Sure. Oh, yeah, I'll do that.
Oh, yeah, right. I'll midnight run.
Will you lead the parent-teacher organization? Will you? Oh, got it. I don't work in the afternoons. I can do that. And I think we train people.
Yes. There we go.
We will do it.
Yes.
If we react, and just like you've told your kids, nope, don't ask me before, so they stop asking. But I became the person that everybody came to. What is that percentage of 20? The busiest 20% of the people do 80% of the work.
Yeah.
Is that something like that? And it's true. I was that person, and I had to stop and set boundaries and realize, like, I don't want to be that person that everybody thinks I'll immediately react and be the first person, because that's how I got to burnout.
Wow. It's so interesting that you say you didn't realize it. I think a lot of people don't realize, like, also something like with brain fog. I have a lot of clients who say, I didn't think I had brain fog. I'm like I'm having brain fog. I didn't think I had brain fog until it went away.
Yes.
Yeah. And then they're like, whoa, I feel clear again. And I didn't realize, because also it's gradual, right? The burnout, that feeling of zombiness is gradual. And you start normalizing, this is normal, feels like this must be what everyone feels, until it doesn't. Wow. That is so fascinating. So then you recognize it as burnout. And now what? Like, what advice do you have for people with, like, how do you...
I think so my number one piece of advice is boundaries. Like, know what your boundaries are, to have them, define them, let people that you don't have to scream it and, post it on your front door. You don't have to do that. But know that it's okay to say, and you can find better ways to say it. And I talk about these kinds of things on my podcast. It doesn't have to be no. It can be, I'm not the best person for that.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. I get that. I get that now all the time. Will you do this? I'll say, you know what? I'm just not the best person for that.
Yeah.
Because I know I can learn it, and I can probably do it.
Of course you can.
I'm a quick learner. I can. But I need to set a boundary and find a kind way to say, I probably shouldn't do that.
Another way to do it also is, like Tom, I said, I could probably get to that in 2 months.
And then they'll find someone else.
Unless they're really willing to wait for me. And I could probably get to it in 2 months, but this is not what I'm going to prioritize right now.
Yeah.
I recently had someone ask me to help them with a book, and I'm okay, but like in 6 months, maybe, and then I'll put it on there. And I think they went somewhere else, which is fine. But boundaries is also like, people confuse boundaries with what other people need to do. Like, they shouldn't ask me. Don't they know my boundaries? But that's not what boundaries is, right? Boundaries is just you, and it doesn't matter. People are still going to ask. People might get mad. People might get insulted. You can't manage any of that.
Yeah. No,
you can't manage any of that.
Yeah.
All you could do is manage yourself and say, this doesn't work for me, or this is yes, this is a no. And you have to be, the work is also have to be okay with however they perceive that. It's however they perceive that. You can't control that.
That's a really hard thing for me. And I learned this, I think, later in my life too, is I think part of what made me a good journalist is that I'm a go-getter. I like to tackle things, but I have the other end of the spectrum where I'm so, I guess you could call it an empath. I feel everybody in the room. And I think technically that's what people say, but I can walk into a room and go, are you okay? Oh. And I think as a journalist, I was able to get to the root, but interview people and say, and understand why they felt that way. And then ultimately, and this is where we could go into a whole nother discussion on media. This is where we lack some ethics in media, is I cared so much about the story that went out that it made the person I interviewed happy.
Wow.
And it was important to me that their message was heard. And why am I telling you this in the question that you asked? I'm not sure. But sure. I think it's important that we...
Oh, how it lands for other people, like we were...
Yes, how it lands for other people. Boundaries. Boundaries were hard for me because I cared, and I still care what they think, but it's not my job to regulate that. If I say that doesn't work for me, I'm not the best person, the old me would go, oh, I think I hurt their feelings.
Yeah. Is that okay? Is it right?
The new me is like, I'm good. I said it in a kind way.
Of course.
And I care, but I have to protect because I can't do that burnout again. Not just because I don't want it for me, which has to be important. I don't want that for my family.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
100%.
They need me here to be present.
100%. I was recently at an event that I went to. It was for like how to improve speaking, things like that. And it was a phenomenal event. Phenomenal. And I felt what happens to me when I see something like this. I'm like, I want to do this. I want to do this so much. I want to do this, and I want to join the thing. And as I started thinking about it, I started feeling I started getting like a panic attack because my plate is so full. And I also have I have tinnitus or tinnitus, however you want to. Don't come at me, YouTube. You can pronounce it any way you want. And it gets worse when I'm stressed. So I'll get a loud ringing in my ears. So it's day 2, and I'm feeling that my ears are going crazy. And I'm like, and there's this part of me that's like, you want this, and there's this part of me is like, you're going to collapse if you say yes to this, And it was like these 2 conversations in my head, like, are you weak? You're not going to do this? Come on, you could do this. versus I really need to protect myself and my team. And my team also, because how many more things am I going to bring to my team?
Yeah.
And the conversation was so loud that I ended up just leaving. I said, just leave and don't make the decision now. Who said you have to make the decision now? I left. Actually, I went home and took a nap. I don't remember the last time I took a nap, but this is what overwhelm could feel like. I went and took a nap, and the point of the story is to say sometimes you could just delay the decision. Like if you feel overwhelmed, like I really feel guilty, I want to do this, versus, but if I do this, I'm really going to feel overwhelmed. Then maybe just delay the decision, because then I went home, I slept, I woke up, and then I realized I really don't need to make this decision right now at all. There was nothing but the pressure of being in the moment. And I just delayed I didn't say yes or no. I'm putting it on the side. And that in itself was a boundary also. Like, not, why do I have to decide right now just because other people want me to decide right now? So giving yourself the space to make a decision is also great.
It's a great habit if you struggle jumping into volunteer. That habit being never commit until you give yourself a day. So if someone asks you, will you be the one to do this? Or isn't it, then just like immediately come back with, let me get back to you on that.
Let me get back to you.
Reconnect on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, they might find someone else on the way.
That they just might. Yeah. That's true. I think another way that I've learned to do this, if this is helpful to people, is I've learned to protect different times that I didn't protect. My Fridays are protected, because that's when I do my podcast stuff. I can't be doing other things. And then if I end up with a little free time because I got podcast stuff, bonus, awesome, I'll go get a massage.
Wow.
You know?
I love
but
that.
I protect, or even protecting that thing that, the massage, like once a month, that does not get in my way. And I used to be bad about that. I put myself after all the other things. And so it can't be looked at as selfish. It has to be looked at as self-care.
Oh, yeah. I protect my workout time in the morning.
Yes, a great example. Yep.
I prefer if things start at 10, but if they start at 9. I also go very late because I also deal with the West Coast a lot. But they'll never start earlier. Like, I need to work out. I need to have coffee with my wife. My time with my wife in the morning is really protected. And if for some reason, very rarely, there's something early, my entire day is off.
Yeah.
My entire day is off.
That's important. Those routines. That's another thing that I think it's boundaries, routines. And those are two things. I'm not as good at the routines. I know I need to be, and I'm working on that. I mean, it's also to admit where you have places where none of us are perfect. Yeah.
I'm good at routines in the morning. I have great morning routines. From lunch on, it's really hit or miss, which is important to know, because that means, and when I work with my clients, that means that I'm probably not going to take the afternoon supplements. So I try to create regimens for myself with supplements in the morning. I'm probably not going to get to a great, if I need second movement. So there's certain things that I know about myself, and it's good to know about clients also. And you kind of have to work with that, because you're not going to reinvent the wheel. Yeah. Yeah. So I know you have so many, you've been talking to so many healthcare professionals on your podcast. You have a weekly podcast?
I do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Me too. It's crazy. Weekly pace is crazy.
Good, but and this is another way I get into routines, though, is I will often do several in a row, and they come out once a week. But that was a huge change for me from the live morning every morning. I can record 2 or 3 podcasts on a Tuesday, and then I'm done for 3 weeks.
Yes, I agree. I started doing that also. I used to do everything live. Yeah. And it's like emotionally so intense. I didn't have to do as many hours as you did, but there's just no room for error, no room for sneezing. That's the question. How come you guys never sneeze on TV? What's the trick?
I have so many bloopers over the years that there was plenty. I mean, I could make you all laugh for years. But mine was, we had a little microphone, and if you had to cough or something, you just put your finger hard down on the microphone and go over to the side. So that I would do that. But then if my co-anchor was sitting beside me with their microphone open, one time, so we all wear them for 4 hours, right? Well, we're up and down and back to my desk in the bathroom, go to get coffee. And I used to take I mean, I was like religious about because I was scared to death. I was going to like a toilet flush was like going to go out across the air. And there was an audio person who would bring our microphones up and down, but they're sleeping at the wheel half the time. You know, I mean, they're human.
4 a.m.
Right? 4 a.m. and they had 6 different microphones to deal with. They couldn't tell where people were in the building. But I was sitting at the desk and I hear a flush and I'm like, where was that? And I go back and it was live on TV and my co-anchor's just off in the bathroom, you know, doing his business and whatever and flush and having a conversation. Well, not more than once, but sometimes you just go, I hope nobody heard that. That one was really obvious.
That was a big one. Oh my God.
But I would unplug my microphone if I went into the restroom. Like, I'm not taking a chance.
I mean, I've been in the studio a few times for interviews, and I am in awe. I'm in awe of what you did and what the intensity and so much in between. Like when there's a commercial break for the audience, you guys are like, there's so much happening. You guys get like a whole meal in those 3.
Oh yeah, I'd eat my lunch. I'd have my lunch at 7:00 in the morning in a commercial break.
Yeah, you guys get so much done in that commercial. I'm like, what just happened? And I'm sitting here just trying to like calm my nerves, and you guys get like, it's pretty impressive.
The other thing though, that coming off of that intensity, that I don't know if it's ADD. Honestly, like my family has a history of ADD, or if it was just the intensity I lived in and deadlines that I lived in. But I've struggled in a healthy way, but I've struggled, excuse me, I didn't cover my mic. I've struggled coming out of that with routines because my life was dictated by the clock. I would get up at this time. I had a deadline every day. I'd have a book to prepare for and an hour to do it. And it was just boom, 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 boom. And I worked very well under that pressure. I like that pressure. But it also led to burnout. So coming out of that, now I get to control my schedule. But if it's a long-term project, I'm like, I'm done. It's really hard for me to focus for long periods of time because I was under such tight deadlines. So I'll set deadlines for myself. I'll be like, I've got this little clock, and I'll go, I got 20 minutes, go. And
does it work?
Yeah, and it is a thing. If you've heard of is it the Pomodoro method, something like that. And it is, and I use it actually with my kids in a healthy way, where I'll say 20 minutes focus, then go get up, then come back, 20 minutes focus. Yeah. It's hard, but
it's hard.
It's really hard to focus for that long. But it's just it's such an extreme difference from what the majority of my life I lived of these tight deadlines, that actually the real corporate world is very frustrating for me because it is, we'll have a meeting on that in a week.
I know. Oh my God.
People will all have a discussion. I'm like, can we just make a decision?
We just make a decision. Corporate and academia.
Oh yeah. Oh. And I work in both now. So yeah.
It's another meeting and another meeting and another meeting. It's true, but you bring up a good point, which is like anyone who comes off from a really, like I live a very stressful life. I create very stressful. People see my schedule, they want to vomit, but I don't know what to do with myself when I don't have it. Yeah. So like I don't do well on vacation. I'm almost uncomfortable. People ask me all the time, how do you keep the work-life balance? I'm like, I'm not burned out, but this is my work-life balance. This is my calm space. But what I'm trying to get at is I think a lot of people who come off of, they've been in the military for a while, been in shift work for a while, they're ready to retire, and now like you don't know how because someone else created that schedule and you learn to function with that, and it doesn't quite feel the same when you make your own schedule. Like there's not that same intensity. So it is interesting. We could do a whole podcast on that. I don't even know if either you or I have the answer, but that's a transition. And so if you're going through that, give yourself that grace because it's a real thing.
It is a real thing. And I think certain people, particularly those with ADD, ADHD, do really well in environments. And I worked with a lot of people who definitely, it was like 2 minutes, you had their attention. Anything beyond that, it was, and I'll tell you something else interesting about, maybe you face this with what you're doing, is, the whole, you can't really multitask. You think you can multitask, but the brain doesn't allow you to really. Well, let me tell you what my in front of me looked like every morning. I had a computer with all my information. I had my phone with text. I had another computer with Slack and messaging from all my producers. I had an earpiece with a producer speaking to me, at a teleprompter with what I'm supposed to say, and then I had about 10 monitors off to the side with every other TV station and what they were doing. And if something happened on one of those, one of us would definitely be looking and say, hey, we need to be doing that. There's a fire over there. Go. So I don't know how many screens I just mentioned.
Too many.
Probably 10 to 20. And I loved it. It was,
You loved it. You loved it.
Fun.
So,
Yes.
oh, crazy.
But anything outside of that, like just, some people hate that. I enjoyed it.
You enjoyed
But
it.
now I'll sit, even my desk, I've got you on one computer. I've got a computer where I do my graphics and other work. And then I have my phone, and I stop myself often and go, hold on a second,
Hold on.
one at a time. Because it was a habit that I learned, and I'm trying to come off of that. I don't even think it's a skill. I think it's a bad habit.
Maybe. I just know that in the few times that I've had an earpiece in and someone talked to me while someone else talked to me, I'm like, what? I must look. I can't even imagine. You lost me at earpiece. I can't even imagine.
Well, it's funny,
and someone's talking to you, and
I don't know if it's a male female thing, but I literally will be in the car with my husband, and he's like parking, and I'll go, oh, something about the kids, and he'll go, hold on, I'm trying to park, and I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm just trying to have a conversation with you.
One thing at a time, sister. One thing at a time.
Like, do you have any idea how many things like you can't? Yeah.
Yeah. Nope.
But then I have to stop and appreciate that and say he's focused on driving and keeping his family safe. Okay.
Yeah, making sure we don't die right now in this parking spot. Like, this is so fun. Okay, so tell me, we're gonna finish this one up with all these people that you've interviewed, like, over time, do you have any great lessons, or either one or more than one great lesson that you've learned, with time, with all these professionals that you've met with over your life?
I could go so many different ways with that because, again, like I think of myself as just a connoisseur of information. And it's why I continued after I left the traditional news business, is I just love learning. So that being a piece of advice for people is, if we are always focused on learning, not perfecting, but
I love
it. Yeah, just being able to say, help me understand that. In our relationships, I do a lot of psychology interviews, and my daughter's a psychology major in college, and I think that alone, there's so much we can learn from enhancing our relationships by trying to look. It's the understand before being understood. Like, just but tell me more, help me, and I'm sure as a doctor you do that too. But so, learning and making it a goal to just continue to learn. Even in my old age, I hope to still be learning. I think the health lessons I've learned are just too many to count. I've thought about, over the years, putting together a book on the thousands of people I've interviewed and what makes them successful. There's, I think, a lot to be said for people like yourself and how you got where you are. It's more than just your passion for what you do. It is the routines and the boundaries and all of those things. I've learned a lot about how they operate, how successful people operate. I could go in so many directions in what I've learned, and that's why I love doing it, is I feel like I'm just continuing to gain more knowledge.
I love that. And I love what you said about the process. It's the process. I try to tell my clients that also, like, oh, I can't get my supplements right, and my exercise, and then I'm not safe. I was like, whoa, it's a process. And the fact that you're even engaged in the process is already a win. There is no end game. There is no goal. It's just, we're just going through it. I love that so much.
Yeah.
This was amazing. Natalie, any final words or something that perhaps you wanted to say that I did not ask you?
You know what we didn't talk about, and I'll just leave you with
so many things we didn't.
I know we could do a whole nother one on this.
We could do a whole other one.
We didn't, and I think it's so important, and that's sleep. I gave up my sleep for 17 years. I averaged 45 hours a night. I'm paying the price for that in my skin, in my memory, it's when everything cleans, right? It's when our brain does its cleaning process. 100%. And I didn't allow it to get to that because I thought I needed to be something else.
Sure.
So I'll leave you with that get a good night's sleep, set those routines, all of that. It's a simple thing to end on.
That is a simple thing to end on. But let me also tell you that while it's true that lack of sleep is connected to dementia and all those things that you mentioned, you did not do permanent harm.
Oh, good. Thank you.
You did not do permanent harm. There is so much you can do right now. First of all, not only are you sleeping now, but you're prioritizing your nutrition, optimizing your supplements. I mean, it's okay. Please, if you could let go, I'm so glad you brought this up because it seems to really weigh on you. This is not permanent damage, especially with all the work that you're doing now.
Thank you. It's really good to hear that because I'm human. I guilt myself and say, I gave up so much. And I do feel that I did damage, but I also feel very strongly that it's never too late. You can make the decision today and be better tomorrow.
It's never late, but also I'm a firm believer as somebody who's made huge and public mistakes in my life. You would not be here in this wonderful place if it wasn't for all of that.
Yeah.
So every day you feel guilty, all of it, the good, the bad, all of it, none of this moment in time right now would not exist without it. So not only should you not feel guilt about it, you should take pride in every decision that you made because you wouldn't be here right now.
That's so true. Thank you for that.
Of course. Thank you for sharing that. Oh my goodness. I'm glad we ended
this again.
No. Yes, absolutely. So I cannot thank. This is so much fun. Thanks for re-interviewing me during my interview of you.
You're welcome.
And thank you enough. And I'm going to put the links, of course, for your podcast and everything else that you gave us. Please listen to Natalie Tysdal's podcast. It's amazing. Obviously, did you not see how amazing it was? She just interviewed me now. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And we'll do another one again, and we'll pick a good health topic, and
which we will readily ignore and then go on to something else.
Talk about a bunch of other stuff.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.